Okay, so it looks like it's time to get started here. Welcome. So this will be interesting. I'm going to be doing some more fountain pen ink art tonight. And I'm going from the beginner level that I started with last week to the advanced level that I hadn't really planned on because I just opened up the Dominant Industry book that I'm going to be doing a little bit earlier. And the images in there are much more advanced than I realized they would be, but I figure why not go for it? There's 3 sets of images in the book, so I'll see what I get. So, yeah. But before we do that, I'll cut over and show. This is what we did last week. First time ever using inks. And I did this is from Olive Octopus Ink, part of her St. Jude campaign that she was doing. She sent out at certain donation levels little books that had different art pieces in them on different fountain pen friendly papers. So I did a turtle, and this is a little bit of foreshadowing of what will be in this book, because in looking through, there's a page that had some turtles on it. So you'll see this is where we're starting. This is the entry level beginners set, and we will be going over to what we will call the advanced level once we get into the book. And then also the Ink Pony Club, which inkpony.club is the website. These are some other things that Lisa sent as part of that gift for the donation. You can see there's a QR code, and I'll hold that up there. You should be able to scan that from your screen if you want, but it's also just inkpony.club is the website. And hey, Lisa, speaking of the Olive Octopus Ink is in the chat. Just showing what we did last week as our starting point. And I already have some lessons learned. First of all, if you'll notice, I have this fancy silicone mat that I was reading Lisa's article. And this seems to be the recommended one to avoid messes. So if there is a mess, this is much easier to clean up. So I picked that up. And since I was forgetting what ink was what last week, I went on and filled the inks up and made a cheat sheet of what I have. So the inks that I'm going to be using tonight are the Lamy Crystal Peridot, which is a nice dark green, the Lamy Crystal Amazonite, the Lamy Crystal Topaz, the Lamy Crystal Agate, Lamy Crystal Obsidian, and then to give one other, since I had it in a pen and with turtles, different shades of green are not a bad thing. Some of the Edelstein Olivine, whichever one, I don't know the exact pronunciation, but we'll go with that because I had that in a pen. So I was just able to turn the converter and put a couple drips into the tray. And you notice this also has numbers. In learning from my thing last time, I went on and took a permanent marker and numbered the little dish, so I can put the cheat sheet in front of me and know what I am using in terms of colors, because the dots, you can tell from that view, they all look the same. There's very little differentiation. And then the other thing that is different this week is I went and let's see, switch back to this camera and zoom in here. One, I got my zooming functions working like I wanted to that were not working last week. But I found my finer tipped water brushes, which should, and definitely now that I've seen the art in this Dominant Industries book, these will come much more in handy than the wider round brush that I was using last time. So, all that being said, let's take a look at this book. Put my cheat sheet up here, put our beginning art. And actually, I'll keep the turtle one out just to show. So, level 1, level today. So we're going from the kind of paint by numbers type of cool stained glass type design to realistic looking drawings. So you can see why I might have been a little intimidated to go from something of this that I felt okay with doing to this, but you know what? We're not going to get better if we don't try it. So throw some Bob Ross in. We're going to do art. So let's see what kind of trouble we can get into. So with the color palette, One, we have different types of turtles here, so I don't know if I'll actually zoom this back in real quick. If you're not familiar with sea turtles, this would be a green sea turtle. This is a leatherback. Actually, that's a loggerhead. That's a leatherback. That's another green sea turtle. That one I think would be, because of the little tip of the nose, it's a different variation of green sea turtle. And then this is, I think, also a loggerhead because of the little spine marks. This is coming, being a scuba diver is coming into advantage here. And then this is a baby sea turtle that you have on a couple of pages. Now, one thing with this book, just to speak about what it is, Dominant Industry creates these ink testing books. And this is the B7 paper, not the size, but the type of paper that I've picked that up from Lisa talking about it, because she does these on some of her streams. So you've got all these different designs. There's this one that's the aquatic. There's also one that's, I think it's the alchemy. And Lisa, maybe you could put the proper name in the chat if you know it offhand, because you're obviously more familiar with these. But there's all sorts of designs that you can choose. And then flipping through, I've painted a watercolor turtle before. I've seen turtles, so I was going with that because it's a little bit more in my wheelhouse, because a lot of this is pretty intimidating for someone who's just getting into this style of art. But the other nice thing that this book has going for it is that these pages are repeated 2 more times within the book. So if this one gets completely off kilter, the book is not ruined, because the book starts over. And then you have all the same pages with 2 more tries. So it's kind of a neat, you can, as skill progresses, if you go through all of one section and then do the next section, you have a comparison point of where you started and where you ended up. But there's some cool stuff in here, like anglerfish, which until recently, when they actually had the marine biologist see one at the surface, I always imagined these things as being massive, and they're actually really tiny. So that was a very big surprise, but it's kind of cool that it's an anglerfish in a library. Thank you, Lisa, for putting in those proper names, the archiving books, in the chat there. So we'll see what we get to with the turtle. See, here's the same turtle page. And this is meant to log what inks go over here and notes. I'm not going to do that yet. I'm just going to stick with my cheat sheet, and I'll probably just tuck the cheat sheet into this page once it's dried of what inks I used. I'm not certain if I'm going to use all of them, so kind of go simple. But let me try and move my microphone a little bit out of the way so I can see my hands a little better. And I guess that's blocking the... There, that should work well enough. So I can see, so let's get started. And I do have the 2 sizes of water brush here. And then to clean off the water brush between colors, this is just a shop paper towel. That's pretty funny, Lisa, having you typed in the Dominant Industry books name so much that autocomplete finishes them for you. That's when you know you've talked about these books to a whole different level. But I'll start off with this kind of medium, I think. And if you're not familiar with the water brush, it's just this little chamber is full. You can screw on the tip. When you squeeze it, it flushes water out through here. So it's kind of like a self-cleaning watercolor brush. But these have become pretty popular with the fountain pen inks. So we're just going to give this a try and get started. Use my color wheel here. And one thing I learned last time too is I need to remember what I learned from when I started to teach myself watercolor, to dab on the paper towel first before really painting, or you can get too much ink down on the initial pass. And I know the peridot, it's not the exact color that you'd have for sea turtle, but I wanted to use the same inks I used last time as much as possible, just so I'm not changing too many variables as I'm kind of going down this path. And then the other thing is if you go outside the lines and you're quick, you can kind of, well, don't go outside the lines, I guess. You can dab off a little bit of like extra, but not if you go outside the line. So we'll chalk that up as part of the learning and not do that the next time I do this turtle page. When I was teaching when I was teaching myself watercolor, I much preferred watercolor brushes over the water brushes, but this seems like a better way to handle it for this type of art endeavor, especially on a stream where you're going back and forth. And I know it'll get easier and better over time. Because even with the watercolor brushes I got, I found that I would almost do more painting with a smaller brush than using the larger brushes, just from the control aspect. And the other thing that I learned is don't be afraid to turn this around. This does not have to stay in one orientation. So we're not dealing with an easel here and oil paints where everything kind of has to go. So I'm going to take full advantage of things like that at my disposal. Now, since I'm still new at this, I'm not exactly certain how I'm going to layer some brown on the head, because the sea turtle actually has just as much brown on its head. It's actually more brown than it is green. And the flippers kind of are too. But once again, we're going for experimental art, not for scientific illustration. So we'll just see what we kind of end up with. You can see there I got a little bit more of the ink on the brush when I started. So it's doing this flipper a little bit darker. So it's definitely a learning process with all of this, but that, since it's in the lines, I might be able to dab that to lighten it up a little. So let's try that. Well, that did not work as planned, but onward we go. And I know with at least one person in the chat has done this and it's very familiar. So if you see anything that you think I might try to help with this process, feel free to throw it in the chat. I'm very open to suggestions on trying to learn this the best way from the beginning, because it's easier to learn the correct way than unlearn after the fact, for sure. This is nice though, because you don't have to get a fancy book if you don't want to. I just kind of got this with some extra credit I had from like the Shopify, that when they used to give you a percentage back when you bought stuff. So that's the whole reason why I got this book, because they were canceling that program. And I had like $20, and I think this book was only a couple dollars more. So I got this for like, I think less than $5 of actual money. The rest was just credit from Drongools. So that's how I ended up with this book. But I'd seen it and I liked, the idea of it. And like I said at the beginning, if you weren't here, I didn't realize how intimidating this would be when I first opened it up. It's very different seeing someone else do it online, especially when they know what they're doing more than opening it up and just kind of using the YOLO. I don't know how this is going to end up, but we'll see what we end up with here. So I'm going to attempt now to add a little bit of brown over that. Let's see, brown is number 3. And I can see that this water brush absorbs a lot of the ink right when you touch it in. So I really have not mixed inks all that much. When it comes to fountain pens, I'm normally just writing with one. So this is a couple of bits of new for me, but I do like those. These drawings have all the shading and whatnot already done in there. And actually, let me zoom in a little so I can show what's actually being done a little better. Okay. The other kind of nice thing with painting sea life is there's an easy escape button that when you see things above the water and below, they're completely different colors because of how colors are affected by depth and water. So I'll keep that as my excuse if this ends up completely the wrong color. So, well, this is my interpretation of this sea turtle at depth, where you don't see the reds or the oranges, you just see the blues and the purples and the darker colors, you know. Yeah, Lisa, I've already learned that, and I don't know if you have a suggestion that you could put in the chat. I'm not getting this diluted enough at the beginning. So I don't know if do you just put a lot of water on the brush before you dip it into the paint, or do you do kind of palette style and mix it to the side and then do it on the actual art portion? Because I'm definitely not diluting this down as much as I would like, so I could do the more layered approach. Well, that is not working with any semblance of what I wanted it to, so let's just try and dab some of that off there. I was trying to mix some of the agate to kind of add a little bit of variation along the edge of the shell, but that did not work. And then my experiment of putting the brown over the topaz over the peridot for the head, also not working as planned, but we'll continue forward. So for starting out, that's not bad. I've already learned that I need to change how I'm dealing with the saturation of the ink, and I need it washed out a lot more before. So what I'm going to try and do here is get some of this topaz, use an extra bit here, and just put a lot more water in from squeezing the brush and see if this is lighter. Okay, there we go. So, I mean, that's what I would have done from watercolor. So I guess that's kind of Okay, so you're putting water on the page and doing the kind of fill watercolor painting version. That makes sense as well. So you can see this brown here versus this brown. All I did was use an empty part of the palette and squeeze more water in to the ink. So I've kind of made my own wash. So that when I put it on here, it does give the lighter color like the bottom of a turtle shell would be. So now when I do these turtles on the other page, I'm going to have that little bit of building. So those should look better than this, so left to right, not as good as it could be. Should in theory get better to the right the further I go. At least that's the hope. But that already looks a lot better in terms of a lighter wash color on the shell. And then I think I'd want to do a little bit darker for the edges. So I'm not squeezing any more water out. I'm just going to try and... Okay, yeah, so that now we're picking up a little bit of familiarity here. Instead of squeezing more water out of the brush, I just let it take in that kind of somewhat diluted. So it's going to naturally do a little bit darker for these outer edges. A little bit out of the lines, but that's one thing. This brush, I didn't have as much control when I was trying to use them for watercolor, just the way the tip is. I preferred the actual natural fiber brushes, but this is already better. So, okay. So we'll take the first two, not terrible. Learn some from the first one, learn more from the second one. Now, for the baby sea turtle, they actually are a lot darker. So I'm going to take number one, which is the peridot. Put that over here with a little bit of water so it's not dark. See what we can do with this little baby turtle here. So that's too light. So this is similar to watercolor that if you get a pool, you can kind of pull the water along to fill in other areas. And I'm definitely glad I found the finer tip water brushes, because the one I used last week probably would have painted this little baby turtle in like one dip. So definitely for this book, you need a little bit more ability to do detailed. So I already like, now that this is drying this shell, I think it actually looks pretty decent. This one, the turtle's face looks, let's just say, a learning experience. And then since baby turtles are just kind of green, it's kind of boring, but stayed within the lines, so we'll count it as a win. Sorry about that. Had to grab a drink. I've had a dry throat all day. Okay, so let's try and redeem ourselves with this other turtle head here with what we learned before. So I'm going to do the lighter brown. So that was number 10. Now I should go right on the little cheat sheet what I did for these mixed, but I wouldn't do that with watercolor because it's a little bit more apparent in a palette. So I'm just going to try and do that by memory. Although as I'm painting this turtle's head, this is going to date me and how old I am, but this kind of looks like Littlefoot's head from The Land Before Time. Especially in this kind of brownish color. So if you understand that reference, maybe you'll see it. If not, yes, it is a kid's movie, but I would consider it a classic. Go look it up. It probably still exists on some sort of streaming or something somewhere, but this does kind of look like Littlefoot with the kind of oddly cropped head-only turtle shot. Now, since we have a little bit of the shell there, I'm going to do a little bit of just the darker topaz and try and just do that part to add that darker variety. And that did not darken up as much as I want, so let's see if I can do this without overdoing it. Number 5. So I just got the slightest little bit of the obsidian on there to try and well, that did not work as planned. So this is definitely a watercolor. I would have been able to save that. This is definitely different in how these mix and handle, but that'll be part of this learning process, I guess. And even with watercolor, I'm still really new at it. And I need to get those out and use them some more. So maybe I'll try with this, alternating, doing a little bit of the actual watercolor paint versus the fountain pen with similar colors and see what kind of results. So do this page with fountain pen inks, then maybe do the next version of it with watercolor, and whichever one ends up better, do the third as kind of a combined, or half fountain pen ink, half watercolor, or something like that, just to add in a little bit of variety. Okay, so on to another flipper. Actually, I'm not gonna. Well, the flipper, yeah, I should have done it in the brown, so we want number 10. Okay, so it's definitely getting easier to stay within the lines, which is a good thing. because that was not as easy with the larger brush last week. And then with the turtle, I already, on the first thing, quite a bit of that is not within the line. So once again, we're just going with it. It's all a learning process. So this is only the second time doing this. So eventually I will have no excuse to be able to stay in the lines. But for now, I'm going to chalk it up to the learning process. Kind of wish I would have thought of it. I have a really good photo and video clip of a cool loggerhead from when we were diving one time in the Bahamas. Thing was probably 50 or 60 years old, just a massive turtle that kind of showed up out of nowhere, swam by us, and then just drifted back off into the deeper water. But it was really cool because you normally, if you're going to see a turtle, you see more of a green sea turtle. You don't see the loggerheads or the leatherbacks as often, at least the places we've been diving in the Caribbean mostly. So whenever you see a different variety, that's always really cool. And I don't know if it's technically accurate, but I'm going to try and do alternating on the shell with brown and green just to see what I come up with. I tried to do a variation of that with my version last week, and then I wasn't paying attention. I did the wrong colors next to the same colors, so it's a little bit of a see if I can do it correctly this time with alternating. So I definitely made that green wash too light. I just grabbed a little bit of the other green, the olivine, to see if that will add in just a little bit of a darker variety there. And I don't know if the camera's picking that up, but you can see where it's a darker pool, and the synthetic bristles will do it as well as natural bristles. But if you hold the brush over that, it kind of absorbs the thicker part back. So you can kind of, normally you'd use a dry brush to kind of absorb. At least that's what, in my reading on how to watercolor and watching a bunch of YouTube and whatnot, a dry brush or drying your brush off a little and then going back on there, you can kind of lift that off. There we go. Do that same thing here. Kind of drag that little pool of green around a little bit more. Okay. will say this is probably much easier if you don't have a microphone in your face when trying to paint, because I'm looking at it kind of not straight up and down. I'm looking at it a little bit of an angle so I can still have it in camera and still be heard, but it's not, all factors aside, I'm not disappointed with that. It's turning out decent. So I just did a gray, the agate, with a little bit of water of a wash to try and do just around the outer edge of this shell. Yeah, Lisa, with you having the headset versus the arm-mounted microphone, I can definitely see if I was doing an art channel exclusively, I would probably choose different equipment. But I'll make this work well enough. And this, I chose the gray because it's not doing a ton of it, but I don't know if the camera's picking it up. I'm able to do a slight little bit of shading, like on the underside of the head here, and like where there would be a dark spot. Now, should I be caring about shading that much with learning? Maybe not, but it does look better with just getting that edge a little darker because it looks a little bit more natural. Okay, so I'm going to go with the less is more and not try and do any more on that, because I think I would just end up doing too much. So let's see where we are so far. So first turtle with the funny looking face. Learning process. The turtle shell on the left. I think that one, being able to get the light and the dark variation, I'm pretty pleased with that. The baby turtle, since it's all green, I stayed within the lines. I'll count that as a win. The turtle head up there needs some more color mixed in, but I can't think of what color should be there, so I'm just going to consider that a learning to stay within the lines as well. The flipper, kind of the same thing. And then the shading and variation on the turtle with the multicolor shell. Once again, we're not going for scientific accuracy here, but was able to get a couple different mixes of color in to add. So, slow and steady. So let's move on. Actually, before I do that, I did want to show, if you're not familiar with my channel, I do have the podcast. I'm between seasons right now, but excited for this. We now have some basic stickers with the podcast logo. They're round stickers, and let's see. I think if I switch to the desk camera, and then if this works, it does not. Come on, technology, don't fail me. Okay, well, it's not working like I thought. It's supposed to zoom over because I stuck one of these on my laptop, but these are just round stickers that have the podcast logo and then the YouTube address at the bottom. So nothing fancy. My wife, with her books, we needed a receipt printer, a thermal, and you can print basic stickers on using a thermal receipt printer. So we printed her all sorts of stickers for her book selling event this weekend. And we got some red because I was like, well, maybe I could do something YouTube wise. So nothing fancy, but it's at least a start. So I wanted to share that because I'm kind of excited. I just got those. I just literally printed those yesterday. Okay, so let's move on and let's tackle another turtle. Yeah, I wasn't even thinking about that, Lisa, with my head in the circle. I figure if I'm looking in an odd direction, it's going to be so small in the top corner anyway, and the microphone's half blocking my face so that I can see better. That one I'm just counting as a whatever. So let's go with this turtle head up here, and let me get this zoomed back down so it'll show better if the technology cooperates. And it is not cooperating. Oh, there we go. Oh, man. Technology. Hotkeys and things that are supposed to do stuff to make it easier. Half the time they don't, so it's almost not worth setting them up. Okay, so we're going to go with, since this turtle shell is the same here, I don't want to redo that. Let's try and do a better turtle head this time. In this, there's the little dots and there's a hair on my brush. I'm going to try and just lightly do a little coloring on some of the spots, and then I'll do the light brown wash. Let me think. In watercolor, you do the lighter color first and then add darker. So I guess I should do the light brown wash and then try and add the green over. So let's see. I think number 10 was my lighter wash. I guess some of the trick with this book is not overpowering the black ink that they use for the drawing of like the eyes or something like that, so that it doesn't overcast the underdrawing. So I guess if I think of an actual turtle, I should just do the light wash on everything and then do a little bit darker in the spot. So I'm going to go with that with just a little bit more light wash on the rest of this, because some of the shading in there already helps with that. Okay, and then cheat sheet, we want number 3. And sorry if I'm not talking much during this part, but it's requiring a little bit more concentration to make sure I don't go outside of these little drawn in scale looking things. Yeah, definitely the microphone being right in front of my face. Turning that made it very clear that I was missing a good portion of each of these. So that's another thing I'll have to keep in mind when doing this type of thing, when doing it on a stream or for any kind of video, is make sure I turn it around enough, or see if I can find a different setup for future to give me a little bit better line of sight. But I'm already going to say, this turtle's head here to that one, whole different world. One looks like a turtle, one looks like step one. I hate that I messed that one up that much, but I've got 2 more chances in the back of the book for redemption. But at least on this one, kind of learning the brushes and the technique a little bit better to make it look more like a turtle and less like a hot mess. And hopefully I got the camera zoom well enough where you can kind of see this overall decently. It looks like it from just my little monitor that it's showing it well enough. Normally I have the zoom higher up, so it's not as detailed, but for this I figured being able to see the art type stuff would be a little bit better than such a wide view. Add a little shading on his underside here, darken that up a little bit more. Now that I have the darker in there, I'm able to go back and just kind of fill in the little bit of lighter wash between, so it doesn't look, it's not white, but because of the dark of that topaz, it appears white relative. So just adding a little bit more to kind of color back in the The rest definitely helps make that look a little better. And then see if I can not mess this up, just to add a little bit more. Okay. I am much more pleased with that of my, I guess, third turtle head. That looks more like a turtle than this one, since I didn't do the alternating colors. That one that I just completely mixed colors that shouldn't be mixed. That one has spots that look more like turtles, so calling that a win. So let's see if I can make a shell that looks more properly like a turtle shell now. Brush cleaned off there. Okay. I'm gonna go with the leather back because it's also, it's gonna be a very brown heavy page, but since I kind of got the two different mixes, I'm gonna continue on that trend and try and go along those lines. And because the loggerhead is going to be less color variation, and this one will also have a little bit of a wash to it. And then I'll see about going back in and adding some dark over the top where it needs to go. Go with the lighter layer first. And after I do this one, I'm going to try the technique that Olive Octopus suggested in the chat of putting just some water on the image first, which is a watercolor painting technique that in the little book I got to kind of teach myself, they talk about, which I didn't really think of for this, but it makes perfect sense because essentially we're watercolor painting with fountain pen ink. And see how that works for me versus making an individual wash for each one of these. Leatherbacks are massive. I'm going to have to find, and I'll maybe if I can have it for, well, next week. My stream will be different, and I don't know if it's going to be the exact time. I'm going to Little Rock. So next Thursday night, I'll be halfway there in Memphis, and I don't know what my stream will be. It won't be art, but I might do something like, what all am I taking to go visit Vanessa / go to the Arkansas Pen Club meeting or something like that. But the next time I do something from this book, I'll try and have the clip or the photo of the couple of turtles I've actually seen when diving, because they are massive. The green sea turtles, they're cool to see, but I'd rather see the big leatherbacks or things like that because they're more rare and just the size is ridiculous. The next time we dive Bonaire, there is a spot I'd really like to go to that we've never been on the island. It's called Turtle Beach. And there could be upwards of 30 or 40 turtles just swimming around you. And I'm like, that sounds amazing. Okay, so we got some darker on the underside there. Went a little bit out of the line up here on the fin, but I think if I do some just general blue wash to give water around this afterwards, that will kind of mask that well enough. I would say Lisa's taking all the papers to the Arkansas Pen Club. All of them. That would be my guess. That's what I plan on purchasing at Vanessa this time, is a bunch of stationery. I'm trying to do more letter writing, and my supplies, you know, if I'm writing back to the same person, I don't necessarily want to use the same stationery. So that is going to be the go back and look at everything on the shelves and just, I'll take one of these and one of those and one of those. Lisa, did you set up ponies at the last one we went to, or in Arkansas? Because if not, that might be just a cool little activity, since you kind of have a panel in a bag. And at Vanessa, there's plenty of ink samples and whatnot to coordinate that with. Okay, so I think on this, I'm going to try and darken up that backside. Yeah, well, this is the second time, so I think rolling in and making a mess is allowed. Okay, so that is a little bit darker than I wanted. I'm going to see if I can save it by dabbing it. Did not work so much last time, but here goes nothing. Nope. Oh well. It's not terrible. It's just a little bit darker than I wanted. We'll be excited to have my 2 new Newton pens, because I think Sean said when I sent him pictures, he made one of those a long time ago. And then getting to talk to Daryl, and now that I finally have a striped, and actually I have it here. I don't know if I've shown it on a stream, but when I went down to Huntsville, I picked up this Newton Prospector out of the D Squared Arts striped blank, which is just awesome. And I also picked up this large size Prospector. Got them both as kind of a bundle deal. This one came with an 18 karat gold extra fine. This one came with a stock nib, so this one now has the 18 karat nib in it. This one just has a regular other Yovo extra fine. This one might be a catch and release. It does look like candy, and there's the first pen or material I saw like this was a Needle Girl's husband Adam commissioned a pen from Daryl that is purple and white, and it just looks amazing. Well, Lisa, you'll get to see them if you're at Pen Club this weekend, because I'll have those with me for sure. And then I had today, courtesy of a friend Ann who was at Dallas, another Matthew Chin nib grind. So I now have an ultra extra fine from Matthew, a needle point from Kirk, a tetanus from Kirk. I have a Japanese extra fine from Matthew that I got at Arkansas this last year. And I think the only nibs that I have left that I really want to track down before I remake the nib video is a Schmidt extra fine, and if I can find one, a coated Schmidt extra fine, because I'm going to do, like for TWSBI, I'll do a coated nib with the Onyx, and then I want to do just a normal TWSBI nib, which I have in the Precision now, so I can compare if the coating makes a difference in line depth. That video is going to be more for me than anything else, just so I have a great reference, but I want to nerd out on extra fine nibs, and hopefully some other people will find it beneficial for their reference and use. But failed on the Frankenpin. Oh no. Good to see you, Rahul. Yeah, this is the Dominant Industry book, and it should have it if you scroll up in the chat. I think YouTube holds the older chat. This is the Aquarius version, and then there's also another one that Olive Octopus put the name earlier on in the chat of what these are, but these have multiple, there's 3 copies of each page in here, and I chose the turtles because if you remember from last week, I went from level 1 and I apparently jumped to level 100, and we're just going with it. Atlantis and Elixir, thank you. But you can see where I started tonight with the turtle that doesn't look like a turtle, and then a shell that actually does look like a shell, and I'm going kind of left to right and progressing, and it's getting better as I go. So by the time I finally get to the end of doing this multiple times, these might not be terrible. They're not terrible now because I'm learning, but they're not as good as I would like them to be, but that's just how my brain works. I love learning, but I hate the learning process because I just want it to get to the end. And I'm aware of that, so I'm able to kind of tame it a little bit, but and for those who came in a little later, I'll show my cheat sheet of what inks I'm using here. I have the Lamy Crystal Peridot, the Lamy Crystal Amazonite, the Topaz, the Agate, the Obsidian, and then to add something that's not a Lamy Crystal, the Edelstein Olivine, because I had that in a pen, and it's another shade of green. Hey, you're not going to know unless you try, and that's the good thing with some of these Frankenpin attempts. You can try it. If it doesn't work, you go back to how you started and it'll still work then. So, especially with the modern pins, the vintage pins, if you have to change sacks and whatnot. I actually love the Olivine. I got that at the first Pelican Hub I ever went to, which would have been, Olivine is the 2018. And I have that in another new pin that I didn't make a video on this one even. This is another Matthew Martin OG1, but this one, the weakness I have for titanium, this is an all titanium OG1. And this is the pin that I just put the Matthew Chin Ultra Extra Fine in. You can see the Pactagon little logo engraved on the nib. And this has the Olivine in it. I don't know if Vaness has those. I mean, I do have a discount code for 10% off most things at Vaness. It's just DWRDnet. And if there's an ink, I know there's some lines that Vaness doesn't carry, but I would definitely check there. Even though they don't carry Pelican pins anymore, they might have the inks. But I do like that color. I was actually talking about it with Olive Octopus because it's right in her wheelhouse of colors, and she has not tried it yet, I don't believe. So I was going to take that to Pen Club. In the last week, I've inked 3 pins with green inks. So I'm apparently on a green kick right now. I have Twisby green and my other Matthew Martin with the Kirk needlepoint. I have the Olivine in that. And then in the video that will come out tomorrow morning, a little sneak peek, the new Asvine V800. And I'm actually going to take a break and show this on the side camera because it's something. Let's see, dust camera. This pen, the material looks great. Nice look, good beefy pin, back filler. And then there's this cap band. Looks like the machine you'd put a quarter in and at the grocery store. I don't know what they were thinking with this cap band. And I've seen a couple people online say the same thing, that they loved the pin. It wrote great, but it just looks so cheap because of that cap band. And I don't disagree. And I mean, it writes great. This has a number 8 nib in it. So it's another Asvine with a number 8. So a nice writer, great nib. It just looks so not nice with that cap band. So if nothing else, this was like a $35 pen. I might take this to one of the local makers and be like, hey, take the guts from this pen, the nib unit, the vac filling, and make it into a proper pen that doesn't look cheap. So I might have to talk to like Nick Pasquale or Scott with TriStar and see what they might be able to come up with, because the nib writes great. I do like the nib. I just don't like that cap band. So that video comes out tomorrow though, and I can make that point clear. Oh, I'm glad you used the code. I'm glad it's saving you some money. I've had this book sitting here for probably 2 months, and I was hesitant to get into it, but getting the St. Jude giveaways from Olive Octopus and breaking the seal on using the fountain pen inks, I was like, well, I could do another one of those pages, or I could just go for it and see what happens here, because Bob Ross would be proud of me, and that's good enough. So yeah, so Rahul, I thought they might not carry that, because now Pelican did just get a new distributorship, so that could change. Who knows? Vanessa has so many inks, and they kind of cycle some through. I was actually talking to Lisa Vanessa earlier today about something else, and they were changing some inks around, and so you never know what they're going to have there. But with Pelican now having a new distributor, sometimes vendor and distributor, and I don't know if that's the case with Vanessa and Pelican, things change over time, so maybe they'll get them back. But I know with the Pelican hubs this year, it's interesting. We've seen a lot of the Hubmaster talk, like on the Pen Addict Slack, that with Pelican changing ownership, not everybody going to a Pelican hub who registered is necessarily going to get this year's new ink. There's some Hubmeisters who've received older inks, so they have a bottle for everybody, but they might not have this year's bottle. Our Hubmeister, I sent him a text, and because he hadn't seen that, and we have 5 old inks and the rest are the new one. So it'll be interesting, because especially some of the larger hubs, like I think it was Steve in Orlando, had just a massive assortment, and having to go through them, because you'd like to think that people would be happy getting a free bottle of ink, but I'm sure there's always going to be somebody who's not going to be happy unless it's this year's ink. So I guess some people are just putting in the time on the front end to save a potential issue on the back end. But hey, free ink is free ink. I don't own, a lot of people are getting the rose quartz, which was, I think, 2 years ago, because last year was golden lapis and this year is the apricot. Neither of those are colors that I will probably use. My wife probably will use those. They're more in her wheelhouse, but free bottle ink is a free bottle of ink. I do like the olivine though. The golden lapis my wife uses, I don't use because of the shimmer. I'm not really a shimmer user, because one, it doesn't come through any of these extra fine nibs really. But let's get back to the turtles here. So I think that loggerhead, I'm going to leave him as is. I think if I try and do more, it's just going to mess it up. So let's get this brush cleaned off. And actually, I'm going to clean this off. I'm going to switch to the other brush and see. I don't remember if it's a finer tip. You cannot go wrong with an Opus 88. I love my Opus 88. And actually, Pelican Hub will be the 1-year anniversary of me owning my first Opus 88. I hadn't found the Pen Club until not long before that, and that was one of the first times my wife and I actually got to really sit down and talk to Olive Octopus Lisa. We shared a table at Pelican Hub, and she had the California Pen Show ink that happened to match the new Opus 88 that I got that day from Gentleman Stationer perfectly. So I just took the sample vial, poured it in that Opus 88, started writing with it, and then within a couple of weeks, I had 3 more because I found Vanessa had them. They had some that were on sale, and that's that. And Rahul, you mentioned an Opus 88. I believe if Vanessa has any on sale right now, I think that discount code goes on top of their sale price. It should show if you add it to the cart. So that might help in your purchase decisions. Because I think when I used the code in the past for myself, it stacked a little bit on top of the already discounted. I don't know if that's true for every product or whatnot, but it's worth investigating because that never hurts. Because I think it was GHP, who's another person in the pen user, who's actually another Houstonian area. He got his first Opus 88 because he'd seen me talking about him, and I told him, hey, Vanessa has this one on sale. And I think he was able to do that, use the discount code on top of already, a small discount. I don't know why they were clearing it out or had it discounted, but you got to take those little wins when you get them. So let's move on here and let's try and redeem ourselves with the other baby turtle and do a little bit more of not all green, because hey, Lydia. Good to see you. So we're going to start with a little bit of brown. I'm going to try and, even though a baby turtle is not accurate to have the brown head and whatnot in the shell, we're going to go for it. And this is the finer tip brush now. So we'll see what kind of difference that might make as well in terms of being able to better stay within the lines and do some details here. Lydia, we were talking about the trip coming up for Little Rock, and what are your thoughts since you're part of the Pen Club? If Lisa brings ink pony stuff, do you think the Pen Club people would be all about painting some ponies? Since you're a part of the local club, you probably have a better sense of if that's something that the general audience might be interested in. See, Lisa, it works out. We can do market research for the club we're going to because someone's on the stream watching who's part of that club. So it's a win-win. Real-time data. Well, I have to talk to Lisa V tomorrow, so I'll ask her. But I have a feeling she's probably like, because if you think about it, it's not really that much of a mess potential if it's on those tables. But I can ask her because I actually have to call her back on something. I was helping them with their website stuff a little bit on the back end. It's actually why I'm going a day early to help them fix a few things on that Friday. Because the Saturday, last time I went there, we got there right before the Pen Club meeting, and it was like a mad rush. You walk in the store and people were already there. And so this time it'll be if nothing else, it'd be nice to have a little weekend trip. And then on my way home, I'm going to visit friends in Memphis and possibly find another rabbit hole to go down to stationery of borrowing one of their vintage typewriters, because why not find another crazy niche stationery related hobby to jump into. That way I can at least try one before tracking one down. And then also going to IKEA to get some more storage items for all this random stationery stuff that I've accumulated as time has gone on, because that would be helpful as well. Okay, so I think this was the green wash. Lisa, we can coordinate the caravan back from Little Rock and try and hit IKEA at the same time. Oh, Lydia, you have typewriters too. What kind do you have? I was looking. So I found, because I spend too much time sometime while working, waiting for things to happen in the IT world. Nashville has a vintage typewriter shop that I might have gone to during my lunch today, only to find out, and I'm not really surprised, analog based store. They didn't have anything posted on social media anywhere that they would not be open, but they had a very nice typed letter hung on the door saying they're closed this week because they're off at a typewriter convention. So I kind of laughed a little bit because it was like a 40-minute drive. So I took a purposely long lunch to go visit the typewriter store that happened to have an analog, beautifully typed note on the window that we're closed. Sorry for the inconvenience. You can email if possible within the typed out email address. I chuckled to myself as I got back in my Jeep to drive back way across town. So you have the good ones. There's actually someone local who is looking on Marketplace. They have a Royal Quiet Deluxe that seems to be in working condition that I think is a good price, because talking to my friends in Memphis who also happen to collect the vintage typewriters, we were talking today and I was getting them to be my typewriter Sherpas and advisors of, is this a good deal? Is it not? But so I might not make it until then if this is as good of a deal as it looks like it could be for a working, best I could tell from identifying it from pictures, mid 40s Royal Quiet Deluxe in working condition that has the case for well below what the typewriter repair store was selling things for. So it might need a little bit of cleanup, but something else to tinker with, take apart and oil. That's in my wheelhouse. So Lydia, have you written a letter to Tom Hanks? Apparently, if you type him a letter on your vintage typewriters, he will type you a letter back and send it to you. Like, that's one of the things he does, because I think he has over 300 vintage typewriters, mostly all manuals. And if you haven't seen that, look that up online, because there's an address where you can type a letter to Tom Hanks and he will type you a letter back from one of his vintage typewriters with a little stamp on the top and sign it. There was someone in the Gentleman Station or Discord who did that, who's also into typewriters. That's what kind of piqued my interest, and then realizing that friends had them as well. So now I'm like, I have a goal. I need a typewriter to type a letter on, to mail to Tom Hanks. But also, as I'm trying to get into more letter writing, I think it'd be a cool variety to type them every so often and mail those, because it's cool to get a letter, but I think it'd be even cooler to get a typed letter off a vintage typewriter, because why not? It's the next level of analog. I mean, it's a natural progression. If you think about what we do for a hobby, I mean, why would you not? So add that in as well for the next analog leveling up. In general, or to Tom Hanks? To Tom Hanks, it'd probably be like, this is cool that you do this, and ask if he's into fountain pens. But for letters, I mean, I actually have written, that's something I need to figure out a good way that I don't risk people's information. But for people who watch the streams and whatnot, I think I'm going to do like a Google form. And if people want me to write them a letter, because I know on the Slack there's an address list and whatnot, but that's not as easily accessible. But, since I want to write more letters, it makes me use my pens. And since I want to stock up on stationery, I'm going to do a form or something and put it like as a community post or link it in the live streams that, hey, I'm writing letters. And now that I have the stickers, and now that there's a couple more people on here, I'll show them again. Well, they fell to the floor. For the podcast, I actually have stickers. We bought a thermal printer for my wife because she's doing her first in-person book event and now has a Shopify store for her romance books. And the receipt printer will also print stickers. So I have some DWRD Net stationery feed stickers with my logo and just the YouTube address. Rahul postcards. That's the one thing I forgot to look at when I did my Buc-ee's video, and I'm sure Buc-ee's probably would have had some great postcards. But that's another thing that I plan to see what I can find at Vanessa, but also maybe IKEA and whatnot. Because I'm sending out letters, but postcards also would be cool. And I definitely now, next time we travel, I'm going to stock up on postcards. Even if I don't send them from there, just to have a supply. And then, I know everybody wouldn't necessarily want to receive them, but I think I'm going to have to buy the Effin' Birds stack of postcards because I find those funny that Brad references when he sends out postcards sometimes. And then there's also on Twitch someone who Lisa rated one day. I Paint Burbs is a local artist, Liz, who does like scientific drawings for Cornell, but also does postcards and stuff like that. Yeah, Pilot does not qualify for the discount. I know Pilot doesn't, Galen Leather doesn't, and Twisby doesn't for Vanessa, but there are some of the pins that it still works on. So, got to take the little battles, take the little wins when you can. It won't help on everything, but it helps on what it can. So, which opus are you looking at? I think of the ones I have. The Minty was the first, but I like the Demonstrator with the flat tops would be my top. Then the Omar, then the Minty, then the Chloro. The Chloro I hardly ever use. It's a number 5 nib that I didn't really know when I got it. I much prefer the number 6 nibs, but that does let me have... Oh, that purple one. I've seen that one. That one looks nice. I've been intrigued by the Mocha Mousse as well. I don't know that I need a brown pen like that, but it looks better in person than it does, but I need another pen right now. Like I need a hole in my head because I need to slow down on pens, especially if I'm going to get into typewriters, because that's a whole nother level of stationary hobby rabbit hole to jump into. But seems like there's a lot of crossover in the kind of analog niche hobbies of typewriters, fountain pens, photography, journal/scrapbook. All of those things kind of merge. So the Venn diagram would not be that far off between those independent hobbies where they can easily mix and match with each other. I haven't seen the new studio color. I saw the new Twisby color, and I think once Beth sees that in person, there's a good chance she's going to end up with one of those because she does love her ecos, and she loves her eco Amazonite with the mixed color. Good to know, Lydia. Good to know. Well, and that's one good thing because my college roommate who lives in Memphis, who they have multiple typewriters, I could probably just go out for a weekend trip and say, hey, Chris, you feel like help me clean this typewriter up? Because in college we would go to, that's when CompUSA existed. We would go build new computers. Just, the CompUSA would close at 9. We'd go at 8, buy components and build a computer that night in the dorm and then see what would happen, So definitely tinkers and whatnot. And, with them being into fountain pens and typewriters and all the things, that'd be a fun field trip. So back to turtles. Hey, Ann, nice to see you. So, Anne, I know you and Lydia were at Dallas. So share with the chat. I know both of you got some really cool things. Spill the beans, of what you obtained. And did you and Lydia, did y'all get to meet at Dallas? I know that there were a lot of people meeting each other between the different panels and whatnot, but didn't know if the Arkansas circle crossed with the Texas circle as much. I know there were a lot of Texans meeting other Texans, but it's always interesting to see how the pin show dynamics level out. So let's get back to Turtle here. Well, I think there's always Arkansas. Let's see. So I need the brown mix, which I think is number 10. Yes, it is. So we'll do this one up here. Because, Ann, I believe you're planning on Arkansas for 2026, right? I think when we were talking, that was on your hope to attend list in terms of pin shows. I think my favorite pin I've seen that Ann got is the Newton Prospector, which is Sean adding in those like random bands in the middle. It just like levels up that pin, because obviously I love my Prospector because I now own 3 of them, but those bands and then that alternating section thing is just glorious. And then getting to see Sean this weekend coming up and what he has left and whatnot, that will always be fun. I like talking to Sean. He's a fun person. But getting to see what's left from the pin show is always a good thing. And then if I remember correctly, I think, Lydia, you wrote that you got the Mont Blanc Enzo Ferrari ink, which ironically I had just put in a pin in my new Prospector. I have the Enzo Ferrari in this one, the D Squared Arts Prospector. And that's such a great purple. It's like this nice subdued purple, which if you've not had a chance to see that ink, definitely try and check it out, because I like purple. I'm not the biggest purple person, but there's something about the more subdued, not as like pow purple, that really is soothing on the eyes. It's a great ink. Nice. And then I got my nib grind that arrived today that Ann was able to get Matthew Chin to do for me, of the Ultra Extra Fine. And I've only written I changed the ink, or changed the nib out from the Matthew Martin that came on it, that came with a fine, to that. And then that got here at 2:30 this afternoon. And then I was still working a little bit and had to then get ready for the stream. I've learned to start the technology side, considering the day job. Don't assume it's all going to work right at the stream time. And that proved its point, because my little stream deck that controls my camera switching ability did not see OBS at all, because there was an update and it did not want to work. So luckily I was able to get that updated and got all my cameras working at 5:51, and that stream starts at 6. So a little bit down to the wire, but it all worked out. And then I feel like the zooming on some of these and whatnot has been better for this art too. Oh, I did see the NYX Halloween blanks. Those were some cool colors. And then also, I mentioned this earlier, a shout out to Olive Octopus. I got the officially recommended desk mat that, let's see if this is going to behave. Look at there. This is the officially recommended desk mat from one Olive Octopus Inc. And for some reason that camera has gone It's turned, so I don't know why. It's supposed to be centered, but technology, man. There we go. Ugh. So, and this is silicone, so easy to clean. I was able to get it on Amazon because it would not have gotten here in time because I didn't think about it, but I've been doing my best to not ruin my new desk mat. I got it off Amazon, and if you look on the Olive Octopus Inc., oliveoctopus.inc website, in her initial swatching tools article at the very bottom, there's some links to the brand name and whatnot. And if you also have not seen, Lisa just recently put out a new version of the swatching tools, like an update a couple of years later. So definitely go check that out. It's always good to see how things evolve over time, especially for someone whose big hobby is ink swatching. You know, this is in the wheelhouse, so you're going to find the good information there. So I'm going to take a break from this turtle, and I'm going to do the grass that is around the turtle. And I'm going to use, let's see, number 6 was the olivine, so I haven't actually used that ink yet. I use blotter paper, Modern Twist. Yeah, it is a placemat, but it is perfect. Now, I was going to ask Lisa, and I didn't get a chance. When you put yours down, do you do the little lines where they're up or down? Do you put it upside down? Or do the lines help hold a spill in if there was said spill? What I was saying about blotter paper, though, is Rahul. So do you have one of the rolling blotters, like the handle that you kind of blot over ink? Is that what you mean when you say leather blotter? Hey, David. Did you find your Mont Blanc you were looking for? I know that was what you were searching, and I saw a couple of photos where there were some Mont Blancs at some tables. So hopefully you found one of your unicorns that you'd been searching for. I know Lydia was able to get one of the Mont Blanc inks we were just talking about, so hopefully you found one of the pens that had been on your list, or maybe at least another ink or something like that. Okay, desk pad. I have a couple of smaller ones from when I first started doing videos. When I wasn't using my actual computer desk, I was using what is now the bottom of where my inks live, and they were smaller. They kind of fit in that space, but they were showing weird designs when filming with the camera. So I changed over time. And as my videos evolved and as the equipment I'm using has evolved, I found not having I had like a tannish leather mat and then a gray one and a black. Well, black is a terrible background because if anything is dark, the camera gets confused. Gray is normally pretty safe, but it has a weird Moira effect on a lot of filming. And I even get the neoprene mat I was using before, like the mouse pad type neoprene. When I'm using the desk camera, it would do that weird visual Moya effect. So this one is, well, supposedly leather, but it's leatherette. And it has not been bad so far. And I've been taking more precautions so I don't spill on it. So far, so good. And apparently I had a drop of a different ink in my olivine because that is definitely... I guess it's a weird reflection. That's weird. I was talking earlier that if you've ever tried painting like this, it's fun. Doing it with a microphone in your face where you're looking at it from an odd angle and in kind of a distance makes it much more challenging. And I understand now why Olive Octopus has a headset-based mic, because with doing this kind of swatching where you need to look down all the time, it makes much more sense to have that set up than a microphone on an arm that I'm literally like, if I close one eye, I see microphone. So for the occasional thing like this, it's not that big of a deal, but it definitely adds to the challenge of making these look decent and staying within the lines. Nice. I actually have, so I was going to try and get someone to pick up a couple of nibs for me from Kirk in Orlando, but he wasn't going to be able to get them done in time. So I ordered them, and they arrived a couple of days they arrived between Orlando and Dallas. And then Anne was able to get Matthew to grind the ultra extra fine for me in Dallas, and she sent it to me, and it arrived today. So I was in Dallas kind of virtually by getting a nib grind and living vicariously through all the photos and things that people were getting along the way. Because that's, even if that's the one nice thing with social media and things like this, if you don't go to the pin show, you can still feel like you're there in a way from seeing what everybody else is able to find and get, and live off their excitement of their new found items, at least for a little bit, until you get to see them in person, or they do a write-up or a video or something like that. So I'm glad you got your Viscontis tuned, and I remember a while back saying that one of them you'd gotten just wrote like garbage, but that's kind of a known Visconti thing, that their QA is kind of non-existent. So hopefully that they're now nice and usable and a much more pleasant writing experience. I'm not familiar with the Octavian. I'll have to go look that up. I like Mont Blanc, but I also don't like Mont Blanc in that, since I'm more into maker pins lately, I feel like I could get a couple of maker pins versus one Mont Blanc. I mean, I know their fit and finish is gorgeous and some of their special editions, but then again, I say that, and I bought a Matthew Martin in all titanium, which that and the other Matthew Martin together is probably a Mont Blanc. So I can't think of it in math terms. It's more of, the variety and the visual look. Because when I first got into pins, everything was like blacked out pin or very, run of the mill. Now it's more of, let me get something with some color, with some look. But once again, let me get something with color as I get a peek, the most nondescript looking plastic in the world, because I wanted more variety. Go figure. But this has the Kirk needlepoint in it, and I wrote 2 or 3 pages in the journal the other day using that. The 18 karat extra fine in this one is actually, that was one of the biggest scores of getting these new prospectors, is that nib happening to be in there. And then this one has the new Matthew Chin, the Matthew Martin OG1 in all titanium, and if you can see, it's got the kind of brushed effect a little bit on the cap and on the bottom. So, and this is the clipless version, which I actually prefer because I never use the clips. Okay, so back to Turtle. So I think if I do brown around the outer edge and then just kind of a general greenish intermix. Actually, I'm going to do green first. So I'm going to do the olive vine green this time. I'm going to use number 7 here and kind of make it into more of a wash. And I didn't, I know this has been out, so let me just show this real quick. From last week till this week, I numbered my palette so I know what's what. At least the 6 inks that I chose. I pre-filled the inks this week, and then I have a cheat sheet. So for those who join later on, we have the Lamy Crystal Peridot, the Lamy Crystal Amazonite, Lamy Crystal Topaz, Lamy Crystal Agate, Lamy Crystal Obsidian, and then Edelstein Olivine. Okay, so we're doing green on the shell here, just kind of a... That was almost too light of a wash, so try and mix a little bit more of that in there. See if that's a little better. There we go. I'm glad it sounds like all of y'all had a good Dallas show. It's always nice to hear good reports. I don't think I've heard anything negative about the show across all the various people talking about it in socials and whatnot, so that's always good. Dallas is on my short list to hopefully do next year. Since being a native Texan, I have not been to Texas probably since my high school reunion, so it's been way too long because all of my family has since relocated to the Atlanta area, so that's another show I will be going to this next year. The only definites at this moment are Arkansas and Atlanta, and then I've already been talking to Beth about us going to DC to get one of the big ones in, and then later in the year either Dallas or Orlando, maybe. Orlando, I don't know. They both have their pros and cons. I think I know more people who would be at Dallas. Don't know if we could swing both, but you never know. Well, that's good to hear, David. I wonder if that means, and that's interesting because it's a Friday and Saturday show. I wonder if that's a sign that they'll look at making it a 3-day show. Because this next year, the pin show schedule that I've seen is going to be very interesting because there's a lot of like very short time for, especially for some of the vendors between different shows. Well, Anne, you know, if you did your part to help the pin show, you know, everybody has to do their part. Throw a little Starship Troopers reference in there. Do you want to know more? So I don't have a counter, but that's my second really old movie reference during this stream, so... Yeah, but Anne, as we talked about, since you had to miss Arkansas through, you know, needing to help with family things, you actually got 4.5. So 4.5 were technically delayed Arkansas pins because you did buy from Sean and from Daryl. So those are both Arkansas-based people who you would have seen at Arkansas. So I'll just help you justify that 9 pin in that way. And if you're using the pins and they make you happy, why not get 9 pins? You know. And you got good pins. It's not like you got like cool niche pins, like the Daryl pin, one of a kind. The Prospector, gorgeous. The, I blanked on what's the one with the G that has the metal cap? I saw them in Arkansas, but I never actually went over and talked to them. But that's one that I do want to go see in person at Arkansas. Okay, so I need to add a little brown. So that was number 3. Yeah, the Griffos. That was it. And I was glad to hear that Queen of Washi's journaling panel looked to be well attended. Seemed like with that being her first panel, that was a great thing for her to have a successful first go at a panel. So good vibes all around, it sounds like. I'm just going to try and, now that I've seen this, spread this brown over this green and see what we end up with here. Since this is all an experimentation. Oh, that was more brown than I wanted, so hopefully this will spread enough. Just when I think I have better control on these brushes, I go and do something like that. But I think Lisa Olive Octopus has said, if I remember correctly in streams, that this is pretty decent paper in terms of doesn't really soak through, which seems to be accurate because there's nothing on the next page, which is nice. So the paper saved me from my own errors. So I'll take that as a win as well. And that actually did work out kind of well. You can see a little bit of the greenish coming through, which is what I wanted for all of the shell. Now this part up here is a little dark. We'll just call that shading. Yeah, I meant to do that. Just some creative shading. Let's get the slightest little bit there to try and do the little dot. As if Willy Wonka's chocolate factory would not have enough OSHA violations, turtles swimming in the chocolate would probably be the least of the concerns. Actually, just darken his head up a little bit more there. No, David, thanks for hopping in. I'm glad you had a good Dallas. Thanks as always for following along as I try and create art that even if it's just Bob Ross who would be proud. I feel like from this thing over here to here, it's already getting better. So, good times. Have a good evening. And probably I'll be wrapping up this turtle and we'll probably call it, oh man, I just made it. Look at that. So make sure if you're blotting that you have a fully dry towel because I've gone outside the lines. So another note for the learning stack for next time is don't use the same blotting towel for everything. So the final thing we'll do is we're going to put a little bit of blue around all this stuff to make it look like water. So we'll get the bigger brush. And I put this Amazonite ink in here, so I might as well use it for something. Let's see, it was in number 2. Just gonna mix some water in there so we get this as a nice wash. Let's see what we get here. Well, that is a lot more than I anticipated, but we're just going to go with it. So it sounds like next year, a lot of people in this chat are going to be at Arkansas, which is cool because Arkansas is just a great show. It's big enough to have a decent number of things to look at, to purchase, but also small enough where you get to, chat, hang out with people, and then ideally I'd like to try and do some sort of recording or interview thing as part of the show, as like a kind of panel thing. I want to talk to Chad, who's the president of the Pen Club, and see if that might be an option because I think that would be a neat way to kind of experience the show in a different thing and also help me not spend as much. If I was doing a recording or like a panel with someone like Daryl and Sean, people who'd been on my show before, kind of like a follow-up or whatnot, and that way people who aren't able to go to the show might also be able to hear some of that and have that after the fact. So hopefully, I'm hopeful that something like that would work out. And then I know most of y'all are not Nashville based, but here in a couple weekends, we're going to have the Arkansas crew coming to Nashville. So Sean Newton and Lisa Vaness are actually going to come to Gentleman Stationer's first kind of store pop-up event now that he has his expanded space, which I'm really glad for Joe. Within this first year, he not only opened a brick and mortar store, but he needed more space. And luckily, within the same little shopping center, someone moved out. So while they're not connected, he has window frontage now that he's in the process of getting all set up before the Rahul. That'd be great. It'd be great. Arkansas it's a doable road trip from out Houston, I would say. I used to drive from Houston to Nashville. So, that's along the way. Well, the Atlantic Ocean, okay, that's acceptable, But Arkansas is a great show if you're able to make it in the future. It's smaller, but it's one of the friendliest shows. It was a great weekend. It was Beth's first pin show, and based off, I think she got 3 or 4 pins, a couple of Galens, a couple of notebooks. I think another Galveston to Barcelona. The relocation cruises. So my parents, they're both retired, but my mom was a teacher and does arts and crafts. So now her retirement job is she teaches arts and crafts on cruises. So they've done tons of the transatlantic. They've done the last couple they've been on are world cruises that are like 6 months long where they're teaching arts and crafts. So in 2020, they were on the third to last, or maybe the second to last cruise ship in the ocean anywhere in the world, because it was when you have a world cruise, it's not as easy as popping home because you have people there from all over, and then they kept going to ports and they couldn't dock. So that was interesting to hear. So I think they finally were able to go to Los Angeles. Like if they'd stop at a port for fuel, no one was allowed off, no one was allowed on. It was crazy times, but those repositioning cruises, you got a lot of sea days. So Rahul, make sure you take ample pens and journals, and it's a great time to get some writing done with a beverage somewhere on a deck. Or you could do something like get one of these books and take a little bit of ink and do some painting like this, which might be a little bit easier to control than watercolor, or just a watercolor palette, because then all you need is a little bit of water. It's fun to pass the time. I love cruises, but cruises can get overwhelming with so much stuff going on. It's not as easy to find a quiet bit if you need a break. And depending on the size of the ship, sometimes it seems like they keep making the ships bigger, but they don't scale up all the other stuff, the lounges, the restaurants, the other things. Or if they do, they have all these new things, and then they charge more on top, which I kind of miss the cruises of old where everything was kind of included and you just did the thing. But now as with most things, you can pay to play to level up. You need more video game lives, you can pay this. You need this. So, okay, so I know that blue is kind of a hot mess, but as we're getting to the end of the stream here, I wanted to have something in there. So let me get this cleaned off. And then let's take an overall look of what we got here. So where we started last week was a turtle. We leveled up. Make sure that's in the camera. So from here to here, I think this is better than this one where I started, just mixing up the colors, but I've learned a lot. No, it's always good memories with friends. That's, I've done a lot of cruises with family and I love my family, but there's only so much you can do with a family before you need a little bit of like you time, at least for me. So I spent a lot of time, like there was one cruise I went on and it was during the Lord of the Rings movies era, and I took the Lord of the Rings book and I read Fellowship, and I was into Two Towers because I would just go like to the cigar bar because that was the quietest. It was the library during the day and the cigar bar at night, and I would sit there and read, and that was great. My parents, they're much, let's go to trivia, let's go to this, let's go. I was like, yeah, I'm gonna go read some. So you do some stuff, but at least for me, I needed that little bit of level setting. So of this, let's take a look here. I think this turtle head up here, I'm really happy with how that one turned out. I like this turtle shell here, and that was the second thing I painted today. So from left to right, things progressively got better. The loggerhead overall I like. I did too much of the brown, but there's only so much you can do to save it after the fact. The blue is all just kind of rushed at the end. I do like this turtle overall. I think with a better or with more color palette, I'm not ready to go to the level of mixing the inks yet, because even with watercolors, I'm not the best at mixing. I'd much rather just have more tubes of paint and go that direction. I'm not one who could start with a CMYK and do magical art. Maybe someday, but call it a win there. So, but all that being said, I lost them again. Oh, if you didn't see before, I do have stickers now for the podcast, and I think I'll probably do something where if you want one of these, I'll set up a form or something like that where you can send. Hey Eric, glad you were able to pop in for a bit, just doing some of the Dominant Industry attempt at art, where I started with this from last week from the Olive Octopus St. Jude giveaway. And then I went to this, which is left to right, was beginning onto better. So some of these actually look like the animals they're supposed to. Some of them look like, Bob Ross would be proud of me for attempting, but I'm good with it. But I do have stickers now from the podcast. It's just the logo with the YouTube address at the bottom, because with my wife doing her books, and which, by the way, if you read Paranormal Romance, my wife does have her 4th book out now on BethDeweese.com. She is selling signed copies and doing her first in-person event, which I'm proud of her, on Saturday. So one of the side effects is we got a shipping printer, which can print these little stickers. So I'll probably do something where you can send an address and I'll drop one of these in an envelope if you want one. Or since I'm trying to get into more letter writing, I guess I can pop over and talk to the actual camera. I'm going to do some more letter writing. So if you want one, I'll try and add people to the letter list and send one of those along if you're interested, because I'm proud of them. I do not put stickers on my laptop, and I actually stuck one on the top of my laptop. I was that excited to get those made. It was really easy. So they're not the best, but they're something for now. And then I think we have a friend who did some of the art for Beth's latest cover stuff, and I'm going to get her to help me with some kind of branding and logo design too. Well, I like my little, unplanned drawn nib logo that I needed when, starting the podcast and not really taking into account the branding and marketing. I think it could use some help. So probably keep that around as a version, but then just a little bit of something different to have some more visual effects. And then I can change some of the things like the overlays for the streams and, tie it in with the website and all that kind of stuff. So slow and steady. And then hopefully a lot of that will tie in with season 2, which I hope to start the beginning of the year, because with the holidays coming up, that's just going to be hard to schedule people. But if you're not familiar, go look at season 1. Of the people in the chat, you can go listen to Eric from Amarillo Stationery's interview. You can listen to Lisa, Olive Octopus Inc. Got Sean Newton, Nick Pasquale, and many others. Jacqueline from Kaleidocraft, which if you didn't see on last time, let me switch to... I got the coolest custom pin block where... Let's see if this will do what it's supposed to and actually zoom out. Oh, that works. I got the coolest custom pin block, which this is a magnet. And I actually ordered a second one because I liked it so much and I had too many pins. So I have another one of these coming in gray that, I look forward to having, because this has been perfect to sit on the desk, have easy access. So that way I'm forced to use more of my pins. And I will consider doing more art. I'm not an artist, but I like doodling, and I was able to make that because I had a deadline and I needed something then. So, with anybody who has slight ADHD, give me a deadline and I'll make it happen, better under pressure type thing. So we'll see. But having an actual artist who can create something that is easier to reproduce for, some branding and stuff like that, that is outside of my wheelhouse. And I'm the first to admit that some things you want to leave to the professionals, some things you want to, play around with. So a good mixture, I think, is where I'll end up. But thanks to everybody, for following along. The chat's been great tonight, hearing about people talking about Dallas, talking about pins and inks and whatnot that they got, and some of the planned shows for next year. This is always great. And then, like I said, watch on the YouTube community post. I'll probably put up a Google form or something that if you want one of these stickers, you can send an address, so that way you're not having to put public or your private information out anywhere. I want to figure out a way I can get that, and then after I send it, delete it, so I'm not holding on to anybody's information or anything like that. But yeah, I'm gonna, when I go to Venice this next weekend, I plan on stocking up on a lot of stationery, so that if I'm writing letters, because I know a couple of you in the chat are on the letter writing list so far, you're some of the early people. You're not getting the same stationery, you at least get something different, because variety is cool to see what a letter might come on that's going to be different next time, different pen, different ink, different paper. So look forward to that as well. So like I said, next Thursday, I will not be doing my normal stream. I don't believe. I might do an impromptu that evening because I will be in Memphis, halfway to Little Rock. But I think if I do a stream, it's going to be something that'll be a lot simpler, and it's going to be more of what did I end up bringing with me for the Arkansas Pen Club meeting / trip to Venice. And I think that will be fun, just to be able to have the chat and conversation going on of these are the pens, these are the inks, and things like that. So look forward to that. And then if you're around Little Rock, I know Lydia is local to Little Rock, but Olive Octopus Inc. and myself are making the road trip out for the Arkansas Pen Club meeting on Saturday the 10th, which will be at Venice. I think it's the 10th, whatever a week from Saturday is. Stop in there, and I might I'm going to have my laptop and something, so I might do like a short stream just to kind of show, especially if we end up doing ink ponies or something like that. That'd be neat just to turn it on in the background as people are getting a chance to play with inks, to do some art. So if that happens, make sure you have the little notification things turned on YouTube, so it'll let you know, or if you're going to be there, experience it. But good times be had by all. So thanks again, for supporting my channel and supporting all of this. This was fun. My art got better as the night went on. And since I have 2 more chances of each of these pages in this book, hopefully that continues the trend going forward. But hope all of you have a great night, great rest of your week, and a good weekend. And until next time, I will see you and have a good night.